question every day, and particularly on videos where I have criticized the translation of the Bible. And it's a complex question to answer because there are multiple different dimensions of quality when it comes to Bible translation. But when I say this, the response I get is usually what's closest to the original. And that is also not as easy a question to answer as one might think. But I think to reduce it down to the easiest way to think about it, in a Bible translation, you're trying to strike a balance between two things: faithfulness to the source text and accessibility to the target audience. Because I can be 100% faithful to the source text by just reproducing the source text, just publishing a Hebrew Bible and a Greek New Testament. But that's not accessible to the target audience. And so what if I do an interlinear and say these are the English words that correspond to the Hebrew and the Aramaic and the Greek words? That's a little more accessible, but guess what? It's also going to be phenomenally distorting because people are going to be overlaying their understanding of English grammar and syntax and idiomatic expressions and things like that, and they're going to misunderstand. So the translation is trying to strike a balance, and the more accessible I make it to the target audience, the less faithful it's going to be to the source text and their grammar and syntax and idiomatic conventions and things like that. And so in my opinion, the translation of both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament that best strikes that balance between the two is probably the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version, which came out a few years ago. And there are a few editions that I think are noteworthy. I think probably the best available today is the SBL Study Bible, which includes the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version and has a bunch of wonderful explanatory notes and little sidebars giving additional cultural and reception notes. And there's even a sidebar from an article that I wrote on the names of God in here. So I'm a little biased towards this edition, but right now I do think it is the best one that is available. Now, the New Oxford Annotated Bible is going to come out in a new edition in the next year or two, and that's going to incorporate the updated edition of the NRSV. And that's going to give the SBL Study Bible a run for its money, in my view, just because I really think the New Oxford Annotated Bible does a wonderful job with its explanatory notes as well as thematic essays in the back. But there's another edition that was just published, the Westminster Study Bible, which also includes the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version and has entirely different explanatory notes as well as thematic essays by some friends of mine and some wonderful scholars. So this is actually going to be a little more devotional than the SBL Study Bible, in that it's still critical scholarship, but it's aimed a little more at people who are reading for devotional or confessional purposes. So those are the two, I think, best editions of the New Revised Standard Version. It's updated edition if you're looking for a study Bible. Now, there are some other wonderful translations out there, particularly of the Hebrew Bible. Robert Alter's translation from 5 or so years ago is a wonderful edition of the Hebrew Bible, has wonderful explanatory notes. It's a little more literarily oriented, and so in that sense, it might be a little less accessible to the target audience, but if you're a little more interested in the literary features of the Hebrew Bible, that's a wonderful translation. The Jewish Publication Society's Tanakh is also wonderful. Now, it's a little more tied to the Masoretic text, so it's going to appeal to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint a lot less in order to try to reconstruct the text of the Hebrew Bible, but they do a wonderful job. And so there is a Jewish Study Bible that uses that translation that's in a second edition. That's wonderful. There's also the JPS Torah Commentary series, which offers wonderful commentary on the translation and includes a lot of great information on Jewish reception history. So I would highly recommend those. As far as the New Testament goes, I've not been incredibly impressed with a lot of the one-off translations that are out there. David Bentley Hart has a rather idiosyncratic one that tries to reproduce the experience of the reader in Greek for people who speak English. So where the Greek is stilted and awkward, like the Book of Revelation, it's going to be more stilted and awkward English. Where the Greek is more polished and refined, like the Gospel of Luke, for instance, it's going to be more polished and refined English. The notes are pretty minimal, though, so there's not going to be a ton of explanation going on there. Sarah Rudin also has a very interesting translation of the Gospels that uses a lot more transliteration for names and place names and things like that, but I would quibble with some of the assumptions that are made in that translation as well. So for the New Testament, I think the NRSV UE has a great translation to go along with its translation of the Hebrew Bible. So overall, I would say the NRSV UE, and I think the SPL Study Bible is the best edition available so far, but the new edition of the New Oxford Annotated Bible is going to give it a run for its money.